Hello everybody and welcome to today's LfS Connect session. I'm here today in conversation with Sheona Goodall from the University of Dundee, and I'm Susie Aldis, a Teaching Standards Education Officer with the General Teaching Council for Scotland. And we're going to be having a bit of an in-conversation today about learning for sustainability and the opportunities during the curriculum review for numeracy. So over to Sheona to just introduce yourself and give us a little bit about your background and your interest in learning for sustainability.
Thank you, Susie, and thank you very much for the invite to come along and have a chat. So my background is that I was a teacher of mathematics. Essentially, I'm retired now, still doing a little bit of work with the University of Dundee. So I taught in schools for the best part of 20 years, then came out of school and worked in various local authority roles, including numeracy officer, induction manager, and all the time focusing on professional learning and supporting teachers to be proactive in their own learning. So this is relevant, I think. Essentially, I'm just an enthusiast. I'm one who enjoys the outdoors and wants to contribute to making sure that we all leave the planet in the best situation that we can for everyone else and support ourselves through all of that. So latterly, I worked at the University of Dundee, but learning for sustainability has underpinned everything that I've really done. And that's about that, Susie, in a nutshell.
Thanks, Sheona. So you've really had a long time of having experience with a variety of areas with learning for sustainability in a variety of roles. So I'd love to just hear a few kind of standout moments from your own practice and also things that you've observed where LfS and numeracy have kind of come together.
It was really interesting thinking about this in advance of us having this chat and how it makes me smile every time I think about all of the things that I've been lucky enough to observe and also obviously to try and incorporate into my own teaching. I think it's important at this point to emphasise, I'll probably come back to this later, that whatever we do, the intended learning has to drive everything. So the examples that I'm going on to share, it's vital that we appreciate that it wasn't just an add-on, it wasn't just an extra, and it wasn't just a plucking something out of thin air. It was actually making sure that the young people were engaged at an appropriate level. A big thing for me and relevant at this time of year would be to look for opportunities like one that presented itself to me to be involved in the big schools Birdwatch, which actually is running right now. It runs now for 3 or 4 weeks. In those days, it was 2 weeks. And taking youngsters, involving them in surveying the birds in the school grounds and so on, but then using that data within information handling and getting quite a few laughs out of that. And one was a young man who decided to, he wasn't happy about anything, but at one point in telling me he wasn't happy about something, he did invite everyone else to, or he shared with everyone else that he now looks at birds, and he hadn't ever done that before. He paid me a compliment without thinking that he was paying me a compliment, I have to say. Another one, actually with the same groups of youngsters, was someone else in the school who oversaw all of the learning for sustainability and so on. They had managed to secure some funding to have some hedge plants purchased, and we went out and did some practical measurement of the areas where these hedge plants were going to be planted, but then had to do the calculations to make sure that we knew how far apart they had to be planted, taking into account the growth and all sorts of things. And again, I'm not saying that the youngsters were any more enthusiastic about their mathematics, but it lent a relevance to them. School weather station is a big thing for me. You just have the youngsters, and I think in primary schools this is probably quite a nice thing, that maybe one class per week or per month or something takes responsibility for gathering data, and obviously that would depend on the age and stage of the youngsters, how the data was gathered, and maybe the youngsters in primary 1, 2, 3 would need to be involved differently to those in the upper school. But gathering data that then different classes can go to when they are looking at measurement, graphing, information handling of one sort or another. Another thing I've seen very well used is the kind of activity area that might be called a trim trail or something like that, where there can be timing, there can be measurement of different sort, again, gathering of data that can then be used in a classroom setting. Fitness data, I've seen this done in a secondary school where the maths department linked with the PE department. So thinking about sustainability being looking after ourselves, that the fitness data was then used, but in the maths context, so the youngsters saw a relevance to that. And then other things, if there's a school garden or maybe a local community garden, in parks and so on, now you often see these. Can the youngsters be involved in helping to design and plan what area could be given over to certain types of planting that would be good for the insects and the bees and so on? Can that be presented as fractions and percentages and so on, so they're having to work out not just areas, but then fractions, percentages of that, or vegetable gardens or whatever. And another one that is on my little list here, if you've got something like a school event, a show, a Christmas fair, a summer fete, something like that, obvious opportunities there for budgeting, for planning, for working out things like how far apart you can set the rows of chairs in the hall if you're doing a performance, where there's calculation to be done, but there's a meaning and a relevance to it. So I suppose it's all like, the context for learning that that we're working within. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of opportunities there to bring together lots of different aspects of learning for sustainability, really quite place-based, thinking about the space that you're in, using it around you, thinking about how to bring in the curriculum, but also the kind of school community aspect of it as well, that it can weave so many things into it if you just start to think about it a wee bit differently.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that probably moves us on. I think we were also going to chat, Susie, about the opportunities and so on. Yeah,
definitely, because we're at a really key point at the moment with curriculum reform. The focus has been shone on mathematics and numeracy very strongly, and there is a big improvement agenda. But why is it, in your opinion, LfS is a bit of a too good opportunity to miss at this point in time? Why should we be considering LfS?
So without doubt, any opportunity to support learning in a way that is meaningful and relevant for the young people, you don't want to miss that. But the local and global issues that we're all facing, the opportunity is there to make sure that we're taking young people and ensuring that their learning is meaningful to them, but we're also considering their citizenship, becoming a citizen of your local community, but also the global community, is one that has to start with drip feeding. We're drip feeding everything in education. So I've been advocating the importance of naturally occurring opportunities for learning forever, really, since I can remember. We can't move towards the vital goals that we have for ourselves and for our communities and globally as well as locally. We can't do that without embracing these opportunities, and it is an effective way to make learning relevant and meaningful. So a big thing for me is that we avoid what is maybe a natural tendency to just pick a context and then add on a bit of mathematics. That ends up being a bit piecemeal and perhaps doesn't give you the depth that you would need, but it also becomes a bother for people to think, well, why would I move away from something that I know works? Or does it work? But there's another question, and we're not answering that one today. But something that a person genuinely believes is effective, why would they move away from that? Well, because in fact what we're moving towards is equally important, if not more important. If what we're doing is tweaking and adjusting and setting parameters around the learning that make sure that the learning is relevant, then I think it's doable. Progression, coherence are words I've got written down on my little list. So they must drive the contexts and the content. So it's not just about saying, well, we happen to have a school show, so let's make sure, or we need to review our travel plans, so let's get the youngsters out surveying the cars and the vehicles that are out. We actually need to make sure that we're avoiding the issue that perhaps is one that that might wind me up a wee bit occasionally. You see youngsters who are able to be involved in fairly complex data collection, and what they're doing is they're using tally marks for colour of cars or vehicles, when in fact there could be something far more challenging in there. That means that life isn't easy for the teacher, but then life isn't easy for teachers, and teachers don't want life to be easy. They want it to be manageable, but they're not looking for an easy way out at all.
Speaking of challenges, Sheona, I mean, that's definitely one area to touch on that, can be seen as a bit of a barrier to doing these things, is the kind of time and space to think of these things yourself. And I guess if things were built in, if LfS is built in a more structured way to the curriculum, we take this opportunity, that's maybe something that will become less, because you're not starting from ground zero, you're starting from a point of view of people sharing their expertise and having an understanding of how that LfS lens can be used within mathematics and numeracy. Is there any other sort of potential challenges you can identify and think about how they might be challenges, and also, how we might overcome them?
Well, obviously there are challenges, and as we've been saying, that they exist. They're there, whether it be learning for sustainability or other areas and aspects of the curriculum. They're not unique to maths, and they're not unique to learning for sustainability. That's not to underplay or devalue the challenges that we do face. But I think that if we look for ways forward, I mean, I was sitting looking this morning at some kind of commercial materials, and I'm thinking, if there's something that is at the right level for the young people that you're working with, and one of the examples I looked at was a series of activities based around a fictional outdoor centre with bird watching area and mountain biking course and water sports area and blah, blah, blah. If you are in an area where there's something real that the children would know, then what you can do is use that fictional one as a prompt, but then set your mathematics with the children using maps and plans of the real setting. I'm not saying they would be able to go and visit. Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. That would depend on location and all sorts of things. But use the context, but make it relevant to the children. So if it's a fictional school show that's in their maths textbook, and you have got a Christmas fair coming up, then could you do similar activities, you setting the parameters for the young people, and maybe the textbook is a prompt for you to give you ideas. If you're looking at things and you think, I can't think of a better idea than that, then use the textbook and look at the surrounding issues from whatever lens it makes sense to look at them from. Another, I think, potential challenge for us is that, as with anything in the profession, we do rely on probably the people that are listening to this, the enthusiasts, the champions, the people who volunteer and move things forward. It's probably a challenge for us to think, well, how do we do that in a way that then permeates the more general setting that these people are working in. But again, let's not devalue or minimise the impact that champions and volunteers and enthusiasts can have. And the last thing that's kind of on my little list is the kind of challenge of avoiding tinkering, avoiding just tinkering around the edges of something and then saying we're doing it. It's actually starting from a shared vision and moving towards that, rather than saying, well, this is what we do, how can we tinker? How can we just adjust that and then make it seem that we're doing learning for sustainability is not a good phrase, actually.
It's always the thing that it can be susceptible to, is that, oh, we're ticking a box approach, we're making sure everybody's happy by they've all got their little piece of the pie. And actually it's not like that. As we know, LfS is about, it's about a way of being, it's about a way of moving through the world and understanding it. And it permeates everything, it permeates everything we're doing, which I think you've perfectly illustrated today in terms of the way that you're approaching, you know, what the teaching of mathematics and numeracy can potentially be. I'll be very keen as well to hear other people talk today and just share a lot of the practice in this area and think about, you know, what really needs to get fed into curriculum reform. Just to finish up, if there's one thing that you could say to the educational policy makers, you know, the reformers at this point, what would you say, Sheona? What would be your key message?
Oh my goodness! Now, educational policymakers out there they've got enough challenges on their hands and so on. But I mean, the one thing I would say is that let's embrace the enthusiasm and know that people want the best, but how to get there is something that we need to do collectively, and that needs your volunteers, enthusiasts, champions. It needs policymakers, it needs those in management, it needs those at the centre, as we used to talk about. It needs us all to work together, and I know that that is happening. It's a challenge to make it happen in a coherent way.
In a consistent way, and to keep at it and to not give up
Yes.
despite the challenges. Thank you so much, Sheona. That's been really inspiring, and I'm sure we're going to have lots of good chat after this, talking about how we take forward this passionate, enthusiastic community and really make an impact for curriculum reform. Thank you.
Thank you.